hey, like this isn't such a scary thing. And really, it is for everyone. And you can learn about it. And it is actually really fun.
Welcome to Bear Lifestyle, the podcast where we talk about taboo topics to make them normal and acceptable. I'm your host, Simona Spark, and I am so excited that you are here. We are about to get naked by stripping away insecurities, judgments, and all kinds of limitations to reveal the essence of who we really are there. Bold, authentic, radical, and fully expressed. Let's begin. So I usually start with celebration, and this time actually I'm celebrating with whiskey. I got this whiskey
Nice.
Texas, Courage and Conviction. It's called. No affiliated anything, but it's just delicious. So cheers, cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah. I'm always celebrating myself for being here and creating this space. And of course, I'm celebrating the guests that I have. And today is the fabulous, mysterious, and not so mysterious Mistress Tash Mia. And also, I'm celebrating everyone who listens and watches this. So welcome, welcome. Thank you for being here. Do I call you Tash or Mia or Tash Mia or Mistress? How do you want to be called?
We can go with Tash today. That's fine. We're not in a scene. It's fine.
Okay. So before we even started, I want to ask everyone to open the show notes because I'm putting there all the links where you could find our fabulous guest. Her Instagram to follow her, a lot of good educational content, especially for those of you that are interested in opening the doors to kinks and BDSM practices. She has a fabulous podcast that I want to invite you to subscribe and listen to. And just go and cyberstalk her a little bit because there is a lot to see. So we just met like exactly 3 minutes ago, and she basically is telling me she's an open book. So we'll see what this conversation is going to take us.
Yeah, go for it.
So the reason I contact you, Tash, is because I've been following you for a while on Instagram. And first thing first is the certainty. The certain energy that is around you in everything that you post, all in this certainty. So I'm just very curious, how did you get there?
It's a really good insight and question, I guess. And it's something I talk about a lot, which is everything comes down to intention. And it's the way I practice my BDSM and kink and my lifestyle, but also now my brand. Like everything comes down to intention. And there's no point just doing something for the sake of doing it. I've got to have some sort of intention. So even with the content I'm putting out, like, is my intention to educate? Is my intention to have a bit of fun? You know, a lot of my content is a bit of tongue in cheek as well. I think people look at kink and BDSM so serious a lot of the time. And It's been quite scary, and it's been for like those people. And really, like, if you see me walking down the street, especially if I'm like, you know, with my daughter, like in my tracky pants on a Saturday, like you wouldn't look at me and think, oh, wow, like she's a professional dominatrix or she's heavily into the kink world. And so that was kind of one of my drivers. And the reason I post the way I post is to be like, hey, like this isn't such a scary thing. And really, it is for everyone. And you can learn about it. And it is actually really fun. You know, I always say, like, in a lot of my scenes and my sessions with my clients, like, we laugh. Like, it's not just like two robots and like, oh, this is so serious and we take ourselves so seriously. It's not. It's fun. And I want to convey that. So I think, you know, when I am turning up, when I'm in a session, when I am online, when I'm posting a video, it's like, what is my intention? Like, what am I conveying? And I think it also comes down to, you know, energy. Like I try and keep myself in a high vibrational energy. I'm not always there. No one's perfect. But at least when it comes to me showing up to something, I'm either going to show up 100% or I don't show up. And I used to not be like that. I used to just like, and I think we all do it. Like we think we have to do something and we have to turn up to an event or we have to post something. And it's like, look, if I can't turn up and give it 100%, then it's better for me. And it's also respect for the other people that I don't do it.
Yes. Well, thank you for that. I mean, that alone, I will just ask everyone to just go back and listen to that all over again because it has so many layers. So what I'm hearing, because I don't necessarily hear words as I hear energy, right? Is this getting into a point where you allow yourself to be who you are. I mean, I am in a space of doing work around authenticity, like who am I? Most importantly, who am I today, right? Because we keep peeling the layers every day. I'm not the same person that I was a month ago, 10 years ago. Like, thank God I'm not, right? Um, so, and I know you also speak about this quite a bit, like everything that we go through to heal, to release, to get to this bare essence that I'm promoting here, like bold and authentic and radical and fully express. And so keep that in mind. This is going to be a very complicated question, whiskey involved and such. So authenticity, and we get into this infinite opportunities and endless options in BDSM space where we actually put on a persona.
Yeah, actually that's a very good like dichotomy, authenticity, but then you think about kink and play, and we're often playing a role. I mean,
Yes.
just to start with authenticity, I mean that is a very big part of my brand, is, you know, being the authentic self, and the long journey kind of took me to be my true authentic self. And to be honest, I was someone who was always quite in myself, but it
Mhm.
wasn't in every part of my life. It wasn't in my work at all. And it really took me a long time, even in my personal relationships, to find that authentic self. And like, just because I've just got back from Gabor Mate this week, I saw him in Brisbane. So Brisbane, I'm a big fan, and he has said something many, many times, which is we all make a trade-off in life between our authentic selves and attachment, and we do this at a very, very young age, like from very early childhood, probably
Yeah.
pre-conscious, and it's
Mhm.
because we make the decision to either be our true authentic self or attach to an adult, a parent, or whoever's caring for us, society in general,
Mhm.
and survive. Because
100.
we can't survive young unless we're attached, not always securely, but hopefully, to society and adult, whatever it is. And so we make that trade-off from a very young age. We make that trade-off on who we are and our authentic self. And then sometimes our personality develops based on the way we get valued in life. So, for example, if you're someone who's extremely smart, you might like go and try and be a doctor or something, because that's how you always got validation. If you're someone who's incredibly good looking, you might really focus on your physical appearance. Like,
Mhm.
and therefore we develop this personality not always based on who our authentic self is, but one, the need for survival, and then two, for how we were valued as we grew up in this world. We can then get to a point where we're older and we can see that, look, I can actually be my authentic self and still get love and connection. And when we're older, we don't have such a need for survival. But unfortunately, so much of this is programmed into us.
Yeah.
And so things get, I know not a lot of people like the word trigger. And I think, what was the other word I heard recently? Activated. I use the word trigger, but things can activate you or trigger you. And they're pre-programmed from when we were young. We don't even realize it. So we think of our survival as being threatened, even when we're older, when actually it's not, because we can all stand on our own 2 feet. So I
Yeah.
think as we start getting older and stepping into more of who we are, if we want to, it's really about trying to be really aware of maybe some things that are coming from, you know, pre-programming from our childhood or our past. And you don't need to have an overly traumatic past or childhood. I didn't have an overly traumatic, but we all have our wounds. We all have our imprints. We all have things that, you know, people did to us that they weren't even aware of. Society does it to us alone.
Yeah.
But at least just being aware to tap into, like, and question who you are. And as you said, like, who I was, you know, I always say, with, even as a pro dom, like who I was as a pro dom 5 years ago and who I am now is completely different. Because if we're not growing and evolving and learning, like, to me, you're dead.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
if I'm not,
stagnant.
yeah, and who was to be that? So I think that's why authenticity for me is just so important, and especially when it comes to stepping into a role. I mean, I think it's hard to step into a role if you don't know who you are to begin with.
That's it. That's it right there. Because I see that. I see that in my work with those that just start opening the doors. I see that with myself as a student of the work to begin with, right? Many years ago. It's hard to know what you want when you don't know who you are.
Well, exactly. I can't remember who was saying it. It's like, how do you know where you're going if you don't know where you've been, and you don't know how you got
Where
to
you
where you
are.
are? And I always do that with, like, I do beginning of year goals in every area of my life, like work, relationship, family, travel, whatever it is, personal growth. And the first part of it is, okay, where have I been this last year? Where am I right now? Because how the hell am I going to know where I'm going?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the same with maybe, in BDSM and kink and stepping into roles, whether that be a dominant role, a submissive role, whether that's role play and you're playing different characters. I think the basis is you know who you are. And that is also a sense of, resourcing, because BDSM and kink can be, it can be play, it can be trauma work, it can be a form of meditation. It can be stress relief. It can be so many things, but we kind of step into these roles to facilitate that intention for that session.
Yes.
And so I think it's very healthy if you're someone who, before you step into that role, if you know your authentic self, that's kind of how you resource and go back to when it is getting a bit, because we're playing with edges. We're playing with boundaries, we're playing with limits, we do play with that realm. And so you do need to be able to put your foot back into resourcing into your authentic self when you need to be safe. So yeah, I think that's really important. Before you kind of step into those roles, you really need to think about, like, who am I? Who's my authentic self? Also, you can't give consent unless you really know what you want. So unless you really know that authentic self, is like, well, how am I know what I'm going to be comfortable with playing with? How am I going to know what my limits are if I have no idea who the hell I am? That's where they intersect really well.
Amen. I love that. Thank you so much for that. Yes. I was sharing in this space before. I launched my first course, the Introduction to BDSM, right? Play, Power, Pleasure. Link will be in the description as such. And was interesting because the feedback that I get for the students, uh 90% of them was like, oh, this course was not what I thought it will be, because the subtitle is like how to build your first BDSM scene. But until I get there, or with the journey that I take them through, is identity work. Help them figure out who you are, what do you like. You talk about playing with edges, right? Like those edges, like some might trigger you, we want to use it as a negative. Some might activate you if we want to use it as a positive, right? Like creating a desire. So it requires a lot of deep inner work and introspection until we actually get to physically pick up the toys and the outfit and what we're going to do here and what do we need, right? To actually know what is it that I actually want, what I'm interested in, what I'm curious about, right? And how do I connect with another human or humans, depends how many players it's in that scene, and how would I connect with you genuinely if I'm not our authentic self? How
I
could you
mean,
connect with me if I'm
yeah.
pretending of being someone else?
I mean, what you just said, so many golden nuggets in there, but, like, you're right. When I, king coach people, that they always have this, like, it's in the first session, they have this kind of realization, and they're like, well, you can really apply this to life. And I'm like, well, that's kind of why I feel
Yes.
like kink and life coaching, because what the principles that we're learning in kink is really things you apply in life. I mean, one of the biggest things we learn in, like, BDSM and kink is, communication. It's
Yeah.
such a simple skill, and people think they know how to communicate until you probably go into BDSM and kink, and then you start talking with people who actually know how to communicate, because you have to know how to communicate. You have to know how to negotiate.
It's very interesting because I have a guest on this podcast that says, like she was curious about it and she went into a dungeon with her partner and just kind of have a taste of what this play is about, right? And knowing friends and whatever. And then she says, I really learn about how to communicate, how to trust someone else. And then I was like, right?
Yeah, and I think like we can often gloss over these bits about, you know, like a checklist. And sometimes I can be like a checklist, like communication boundaries, negotiation, whatever. But it's true, like there's so much skills to be learned through a scene, through a BDSM. Like as you said, like trust is a massive one.
Yeah,
Being able to say no,
yeah.
the whole concept of consent seems again really easy. But
Mm-hmm.
then you look into your everyday life and or look at people around you and how many people have problems saying no, and
Mm-hmm.
how many problems is created when people can't take a no.
Mm.
It's very straightforward as BDSM and kink. There's either consent or there's not.
That's it though. I talk about BDSM and I say that, I help people improve the intimacy with kink and BDSM. I help people heal their traumas, including sexual trauma, because I'm talking for myself. I went through that experience with kink and BDSM. And just talking about those, like the pillars, right? The trust, the communication, the respect and such, is we are too used to overlook those in everyday life. But when you get into a scene, there is no overlooking there. It is or is not, or nothing
Yeah.
happens. So then as you actually get to embody those core values, I'm looking them like core values. And then you could bring them and let them overflow into your life. Because unfortunately, most of us, we didn't have that in our life before we went into the space to take it
I mean,
seriously.
but even if we look at, I don't use vanilla as a mean term. I'm just referring to it as like non-normative, like non-kink play, basically.
Non-BDSM.
But
Yes, yes.
there's a lot more consent problems in vanilla play, I believe. Of course, there's going to be consent. There's going to be predators in every aspect of everything in this world. So I'm not saying that kink and BDSM are immune. I have witnessed it, so I know it's in there. But I see more instances of non-consent, no communication, no negotiation in the vanilla play world than I ever see in BDSM and kink. The amount of stories I've had, especially from like girlfriends, where they've gone into experiences and they're like, well, he got a bit rough and he like choked me and he pulled my hair. I'm like, did you negotiate any of this beforehand? No.
Mm,
Especially that kind of like, I think maybe the current generation of, men over the age of 25, 30, they've seen rough sex through pornography or online things or BDSM kink scenes.
yes.
And they've just adapted it as like, oh, well, you just like throw it in because, you never see the pre-scene negotiation. This is my
Yeah,
big problem with when people only study like kink and BDSM through like online pornography, which I have no problem with pornography per se, but I'm like, the problem with that is that's actually not what it is. They don't go into a scene and do what the fuck they want. But this is the
exactly.
message that I think people who haven't been educated in kink and BDSM, and most people aren't,
Mhm.
they just take away these bits they've seen and then just like apply it.
I agree. I've been way more time in vanilla than in the other space. And I see that in a dating space over and over again. I see, men looking for sub and they're very demanding. I'm like, wait a minute, you don't get to talk with me like this. Oh, you're not a qualified sub. I'm like, I know you. Predators hiding behind the Dom label. Like, let's
Oh, I know them.
right.
Yeah,
So, or also, and this is not gender specific, right? But also those they take sub role because they think that that's the only role for them because they never learn how to speak up or how to have boundaries. And I'm like, no, let's get out of there. So, but why? Again, and it's my opinion, of course, is because we didn't raise our standards of communication and trust and boundaries in our everyday life.
100%.
Mm.
Definitely. And I think when you're talking about these people in these, the dominant and subs you were talking about before, that's not actual dominance and that's
Mhm.
not actually submissive. And I think
That's
that's the
not.
problem is that people have a very bad perspective of each of those terms actually. They think that like dominance is being like mean, overbearing, aggressive, and it's not. It's about leadership, it's about facilitation, it's about being able to hold space for someone.
Caring.
Yeah, it's about being able to read energy.
Yeah.
Like, it's actually quite, I know people aren't gonna like this, but it's quite a soft role. You have to really be very highly emotionally attuned to someone. I start every session energy attuning to my client. Like,
Mhm.
that is half my role, is being able to lock into their energy. And submissive actually holds a huge amount of power. Like a
Yeah, when
huge
people
amount.
think that that's the powerless position, I'm like,
No.
the opposite
Like,
of it.
try being vulnerable. Like,
Yeah.
that's what I challenge to people. It's like, you try being vulnerable. Like,
Hmm.
there is so much strength from vulnerability, and also knowing your boundaries, knowing your limits, knowing when to say no, knowing when to change your mind even.
Hmm.
That comes again back to consent. Consent is not a yes or no once answer. It's an ongoing discussion, and it can be revoked at any time. So
Hmm.
to be someone to be truly in their submissive and not to even just let things roll over them in a scene when they are past their boundaries, to me, that's not true submission.
Yeah.
And also, you've got to know both sides of it to be able to do both roles. You've got to understand dominance, you've got to try it. You've got to understand submissive, you've got to try it to be able to flow into whichever role you might identify with. And that changes over time as well.
Changes, of course. I always thought that I'm a switch. But from bad reasons, not for accurate reasons. Like, I'm open-minded and I'm curious, and right, and I could play both roles. Yeah, it's one thing to play, it's another thing to live it, right? And then I'm like, oh, I switch with the dom predominance, because it happened that I met submissive men, right? Until I actually met a dumb man that allow me to sink into my sub role, and I was like, oh my god, this is where the power is hiding. It was such a revelation, because nobody told me. I mean, I read the books, right, but nobody told me, and I haven't experienced it. So now when I look at people, I say, it's a very powerless position. Okay, now we could start a conversation.
Yeah. No, but it's very true. Like, for me to be able to submit to someone, which at this point in time is probably my husband, and I probably submit for one other person that I know, but there's huge amount of trust there.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? That's a huge amount of trust.
Yeah.
And that's why I take what I do so seriously, because I know the amount of trust you have to have in someone to submit to them.
Mhm.
And it is a very unique thing to create that space for someone to move into, for them to feel comfortable to move into that submissive space, because it's not an easy space to move into. And I think that's why we say, like, there's so much strength and power into to move into that space, but also to find someone that can hold that really vulnerable space for you is not common.
It takes time, because I see that with dating is like, oh, I like talking. It's like, yeah, this is the lifestyle that I'm interested in. I want to know what my potential partner, what kind of lover he is, what it's into it, right? But from there to, oh, I'm this role, and can you be that role, and let's do that. I'm like, wait a minute, this
Yeah.
doesn't work like that, because again, we go back to getting into a detailed and clear communication, which takes time to build it, but and that trust. Like, I never ever in my life, and I've been through some serious shit throughout my life, I never been experiencing and touching such a deep level of trust than being into this dynamic.
Yeah. And as you said, like, you can't just jump into it. And like, even me as a professional, the first sessions that if I have new clients, I have a very lengthy intake, and we're talking about a lot of things. And also, sometimes people can be a bit shy. That's very normal, especially when they're turning up to a pro dom for the first time, or first time they're seeing you at least.
Mhm.
But I always tell them, like, the more information I can get from you, the better this is going to work.
And the better you are going to feel.
Exactly. The better it's going to, not just the work, as I mean in the scene, I mean, the better that what the work we're doing here is going to work. Like,
Right.
whatever you're trying to move through, the more you can tell me about it, or the more you can tell me about yourself, or the more I can get a sense of you, the better I'm going to be able to do my job, and the much more that you're going to actually get out of this session. So you're right.
Absolutely.
It's not like it's something you can just jump in and out of. And I always find that very, red flag if someone thinks that, or like, especially, I'm in an open marriage, so I can, date other people. And, sometimes I do get people who see me like as my profession, which is not my profession, my personal life are two separate things. But they're like, oh, can you like dominate me? I'm like, it's not that simple. Like, I don't
Yeah.
just don't dominate you. Like, I need to like sit down and have a like proper consenting conversation with you in negotiation. But they just see this as like, just dominate me. And I'm like, that's just not what it is.
Yeah, yeah. For the first time being in this work, I really, when people, there's that saying, this is not personal, it's business. And I'm like, no, this business is very personal. This is very personal. We're not just jumping into things. So yeah, thank you for touching on that. Like preparation and everybody's different, right? And every new couple is different because it's a new energy, a new entity. Like what you experience with a client in terms of time to get into the space might not be the same with another client, right? Because different speeds, different people, different ways to work through. Not to mention we are back into triggers and activation. And I'm very curious to ask you, like, how do you see the healing in this space?
I mean, there is a lot more work going on about like using BDSM and kink as healing, and I'm like 100% on board with that. And like, as someone who is, I'm currently studying under Layla Martin to become a Vita certified coach in love, sex, and relationships. So we're doing a lot of trauma work. And the reason why I was kind of brought to that space is because of what I've been doing for the last,
Right.
X amount of years. And because I am working in that space a lot. And so I'm like, I need to get more across this. So it is something that I have brought more and more into my work. That being said, like from a professional's point of view, I always make sure that if I am working with someone who is working through deep trauma, and I have had that with clients who are working through like serious sexual trauma, and I'm talking not just female clients, I'm talking a lot of male clients here.
Right.
Sometimes I'm working alongside a therapist.
Right.
Sometimes I have had conversations with, like, they've asked me to like have a quick conversation with their therapist, or I just know what's going on. So I always make sure that I know the boundary of that. But yeah, the potential to use kink and BDSM, people use, I think people sometimes see like, if someone's using something from their traumatic past in a scene, they think that's like re-traumatizing. But I'm like, actually, they can be using it to take the power back and rewrite this script.
But depends of the facilitator.
Everything
Depends of
depends
who's
on
holding the space.
100%.
Because I'm
100%.
fairly new to the space, but I have a lot of experience in coaching and healing.
Yeah.
That's why I start my career, right? And now I could actually get all those skills and implement and apply them here. And to what you say, there is spaces where like we are not going to start working together until you actually get a therapist. Like,
100%.
my first question is like, who is your support system? I need to know what's happening when you're not here. Who you talk with, who you cry with, who you celebrate with, who you complain to, who's hearing your thoughts, who's holding you at night. Right?
Yeah, 100%. And that's being ethical in your practice. And of course, like, everything comes down to like who you're doing it with. If you're not doing it with someone who knows how to hold people in that space, it can border on dangerous. It also comes down to the person who's doing the work. So say someone is trying to work through some issues, I would hope that person does have all that support network or has been working with a therapist. I mean, I think we should all bloody have therapists, but and that's where disclosure comes into it. If you engage and play with someone and don't disclose a trauma that is relevant to the scene, I actually look at that as you are taking consent away from that other person, because they don't actually know what they've consented to play with if you haven't disclosed information of some pretty serious stuff that you're trying to work through a scene in. So I think that can be quite nuanced, and we have to be very careful around those things. But 100% we can use it to work through so much space, or just working through our shadow sides. Like, we don't even need to go into deep trauma. Like, literally, as the general person, we all have shadows. We all have sides of ourselves. And that's a beautiful thing about role playing kink and BDSM is we can bring in those shadow parts. We can celebrate those shadow parts. You know, I get a lot of sissy clients, love sissy clients, they're my favorite clients, and I seem to draw them in. And, you know, sometimes when we're doing a thing, it's not like, you know, I'm punishing you because you're some dirty, you know, sissy. It's I'm punishing you because you don't let this beautiful side of yourself out enough.
Right. You
So
stay in your shadow.
yeah, so let's
Yes,
play with
yes.
these shadows and let's celebrate these
In
shadows.
the end of the day or the session or the line, it's always empowerment. And this is the main reason that I created this space and want to have, you know, guests like you to talk from on all angles, is to really break the taboo around the kinks and BDSM, because I said it again, it's not all wet dark dungeons with whips and letters, right? It gets to be actually soft and sensual and sexy and warm and caring, and like the aftercare alone. I mean, let's just be real. The aftercare is pretty much non-existent into a vanilla sex life, where
Oh, no.
here it's like
Who talks
the
about how it
process.
was?
Yeah, and it's like,
Like,
you know, you're done and he's snoring next minute. I'm like,
yeah.
now what? What am I doing with this boiling body that I'm in right now?
Especially if you're someone who, I mean, I don't want to be sexist. You know, women, we activate during sex,
Yep,
especially if it's the right type of sex where we've been given the time to warm ourselves up. We've been given the time and we know how to. I know not everyone does know how to,
yep.
but we know how to activate those energy points in our womb space, in our
Mm-hmm.
vulva. And we're just so like, you know what it's like? We're buzzing, we're
Yep,
live. You know, orgasm is not the pinnacle and then we fall asleep for us.
yeah. That's
You
not
know,
the main thing for us.
yeah.
There's so
So
many
we've
other
got
things
all
to
this,
do besides that.
yeah, we've got all this energy circulating, and then what? It's just like switch it off.
Yeah,
Like that's just
yep.
not how it is. So as you said, like aftercare, like it's so important. It's so important to kind of bring
And
you back
it's
down.
such a powerful part of the whole experience. Like you cut that out, and now you're left with, I don't know, you're left with vanilla and abuse if you cut
Well,
that
that's
out.
why we get drop. You know, we talk about sub drop, dom
No,
drop.
yeah.
I mean, you can get that in
Mhm.
vanilla life.
Yep.
You know, you've just had this crazy, connected, energetic experience with someone, and then maybe you're walking down the street home. Like
I
that's a
had a
drop.
conversation. I have a conversation with somebody the other day. We are talking about the dom drop and the sub drop, and it's mainly sub drop because I mean dom drop, because sub drop is talk a lot, but dom drop is not talk enough, right?
Yeah.
And and then I was like, man, is that what the falling in love is? Is that what, like, when, you know, we are just silly and we don't know who we are and we just fall in love and we just, oh, I have the best sex of my life. This is the man of my dream. And then it's all gone, you know, so we
It's hormones. Like we activate
hormones.
it is like that's what I always say. I'm just like, it's just bloody fucking hormones. Like we get, you know, serotonin, endorphins, adrenaline release. We get that during kink and BDSM, which is why we have the drops. Is because we have all these hormones and chemicals
Like such
released
a
in our
high
brain.
level. And then
Yeah,
they
and we go high.
boom.
And that's why, as you said, like aftercare is so important. I love what you said though, that dom drop's not talked enough about. I've had this conversation with a friend of mine who's a rigger, and he's like, there's not, in general, there's not a huge amount of support for DOMs.
Yep.
Like there is a lot of focus on the subs, and even, you know, as a community, we don't look at supporting our DOMs a huge amount because we think like, oh, they've got it got it under control. But no one's really talking about the pressures it is sometimes to be a DOM, the
Yeah.
amount of energy it takes to hold space for someone. You know, that's why I'm very limited with it, like how many BDSM session clients I see. Like I'm not talking coaching, I mean in a scene, those
Right,
types
right.
of clients. I'm limited with
In the role.
how much I will session in a week. I mean, I think everyone who works with energy learns it the hard way at some point in their career. They will overdo it and they will burn out and crash. When it happened to me, I ended up in hospital and I had to take 4 months off work. And that
Oh,
was literally because I was just taking on clients all the time, like working too many times in a day, taking on too many clients. It's like letting my energy boom, 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 not having enough boundaries with my energy, not
right.
having enough aftercare with myself as a dom. Like that's another thing, especially as a pro dom, because you are focused on your client, because at the end of the day, they are a client. So I'm focused on my aftercare with them, making sure that they're okay. So I need to make sure that I'm doing enough aftercare for myself. And at the time, I thought like taking a shower was enough. No,
Right,
it's not. You need to get that energy
right.
off.
Yeah, yeah. What people don't realize, and I see that, just, clients like, hey, like I'm in a space when people come to me because they want to open the door to this, or like I guide them to the introduction, right? And it's like, oh, we were thinking, it's Valentine's and we go for dinner and then we have like a little BDSM sesh. And I'm like, no, we don't do little BDSM sesh. We don't do that. Requires preparation.
Yeah.
Like you need to be rested, fed, hydrated. You need to be present. You need to carve hours out of your time and plan it and negotiate it and go through the things, right? And then clean up the next day if possible. So you
Yeah.
actually savor the hangover of an
Well, actually,
amazing
I
session.
actually have clean up as part of my negotiation, like when I am teaching, because I'm like, decide who's actually cleaning up. It might seem stupid now,
What do you mean by clean up
like
specific?
at the end of a scene, like who's gonna actually clean up the space?
Oh,
Like
yes, yes,
who's
yes, yes.
who's
Who's
gonna,
putting
like,
the toys away? Yes. Who's
because
doing
who's actually
dishes?
doing that? That's part of it, because then it actually could really, like, it's like with anything after dinner, and like who's cleaning up the dishes, as you just said. Like there could build up a lot of resentment if it's just left for one person. I'm like, no, you need to have like, as you need to have that all figured out beforehand. So you can't just like, go into it willy nilly.
Or you
The
could,
state of your mind is very important. Like that was a very good point. Even I think I can't remember who posted something about it, but it was like BSM according to your menstrual cycle.
oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
I was like,
absolutely.
100%. I'm very cognizant, like the week before my
Absolutely.
period,
Yeah,
I don't send that much
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
because
Like you need to know where your estrogen level is
yeah,
in
because
every
then
week of
my
the month.
energy will affect it. And
Absolutely.
like, and I don't want that happening. And I have had that happen. I remember I had a session and my energy was just not there. And I could feel it was impacting the session. And so I've got to be very cognizant of where my energy is at the moment.
Yeah.
Generally these days, like when I session, I get in such a good mood.
Mm.
Like I've really learned how to make sure my mind frame is where it needs to be, where my energy is where it needs to be before I go into that session. And I mean, anyone that's experienced Dom High knows. I mean, is there any better feeling? Like,
It's not though. I thought, okay, so I got a really good feeling when I finally got into, after years, into a deep meditation practice that I'm like, oh, I was like sitting with God kind of feeling, right? And then I entered into BDSM, like, oh, okay.
yeah. Oh, it's magical. Like when you
Because
are,
it's very, very extreme, absolute presence.
oh, and
If
it's
it's
just,
not absolute presence, then it's not done well. So when you're in absolute presence, is when you get that natural ecstasy. Like, I don't know, the whole world is gone, nothing else exists. I don't know my name. Like I'm just so in my body. I always describe it like I'm so in my body that I could feel my body from the inside of my skin. Like I'm right here under my skin. I could feel the contour of my body.
and it's
There's
so,
no other space in my life where I could have.
no, to be honest, like I meditate every day. Like
Mm.
I just, it's like a non-negotiable for me. But my mind wanders. Like
Yeah,
and I think people don't get that sometimes about meditation. I certainly didn't before I started. Is like that is part of the practice, bringing your
yeah,
mind back. But I
yeah.
can say the only place in my life, like whether I'm reading, studying, cooking, whatever it is, that my mind literally doesn't wander is when I'm in a BDSM scene.
Yeah. Same
Like
here.
I can look back and think about, like, I had a scene last night, yesterday afternoon with a couple client of mine I've seen for a very long time, and I'm just in it. Like I am there my brain is never thinking about anything else.
Yep.
And there is so few opportunities in your life for that to actually occur without you actually having to put in the effort. Like, because I've done all the work, because I've done, like, if you're someone who hasn't done the work, and like I'm years and like I'm a decade into kink, more now. I'm not saying you'll step into this, but now I'm like, if you've done the work and learned and educated yourself and are practicing in a very healthy space, it is a beautiful thing to achieve. So I think, even people starting out on it, yes, you're not going to step into that straight away. I'm not saying that at all.
But it's
But
a
it's something,
beautiful,
it's
beautiful
something to work towards.
work towards. Yes.
Yeah.
I like that you say effortless, because I think that is the secret to effortless anything. Again, I'm taking what I'm learning in this space and taking it to my life. Why it feels hard and why it's effort and why it's hard, whatever the hell we are doing, is because our brain kicks in. So when we're in a space where we're like so present and full in our body that the brain is just mush gone, it's effortless. It's pure presence and joy. It's funny because I was talking with my son the other day. We talk about beliefs, and he was talking about his therapies, about some things that he unpacked. And I tried to tell him, going back to the beginning of our conversation, to say, look, I give you a lot of beliefs without asking you if you want them or not. So, but now you're in such a beautiful space in your life when you're aware. And these serve you very well to survive, to be driven, to be amazing, to this, and that. And now you get to say, hey, I like this, I keep it. I don't like this, I throw it away. I want that one, let me bring it in. You get to choose, right? And getting back into meditation, and he was like, I'm having a hard time because I feel like I have so much things to do and I'm so, yes, let's try mindfulness. Like, drink that glass of water and actually feel the temperature and feel going down into your stomach, right? Presence. Those little moments that we actually get to still from throughout the day, to train our brain that it's safe, as you were saying, safe to let us be present, to let us be in our body. Nothing to solve, nothing to do, nothing to decide, to strategize, to none of that, right? And it's important because when people says, oh, hey, our marriage, this and that, and we just decided, let's open the door to kink. I'm like, well, first of all, kink is not going to solve your problems. Maybe we should solve the problems first. and second, you can't just jump into a session and have the experience that we are talking here. You have to train yourself.
Oh, definitely. And that's why, as you said, like, the mindfulness aspect is so important. And that's why I always start my coaching sessions, kink sessions, whatever scenes, whatever it is, with some sort of breath work practice, mindfulness practices, five senses. Yeah, grounding, just feeling your feet into the ground, connecting to the earth. I love putting my hands around someone's ribs from behind them and breathing with them and putting my body on theirs. That's when I tap into the energy. That's what I'm trying to do. I do a bit of hypnosis, things like that. Like, it is so important to have that presence, and because that's the grounding of where we then go into it. But if you don't have that first, and as you said, a lot of people don't have that step first. So it's like, let's put the BDSM scene aside for a second.
Yeah.
Let's actually learn how we can get back into our bodies, because unfortunately in today's culture, we have like almost like chopped off our heads from our bodies, and we don't feel anymore. And I think you said beautifully, like, you feel it under your skin. Like, it's like you feel every inch of you. A lot of people don't know how to do that anymore. So that's kind of like step one. Like, step one is not picking up a flogger. That's like step 14. Like,
oh, so they go like, so is it part of your program? You're going to go like in a sex shop and buy toys? I'm like, as you say, I'm like, where is your meditation practice these days? What kind of spiritual practice do you have in your life? Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Right.
No, and it's such an important point. And, I've trained one-on-one pro doms and lifestyle doms. I do quite a lot of that. I'm actually about to start someone new, and, they ask, what's the program? And I send it through, and it starts with, the first bit is like learning about yourself. Like that's the first bit. And depending on how far along you're in that journey, because, you know, some people, you know, if I turned up to do something that I've done a lot of self-work, I'm always doing self-work. But some, you know, so it depends where someone is on their journey. But if they haven't done a lot, you know, we will be spending a lot of time in the first few sessions working on that before we actually move into power dynamics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Whew. Okay. So before we move into power dynamics, we will have to wrap it up and launch the invitation for you to come back and actually focus on power dynamics, because man, that could be so juicy to talk with you about.
And there's so many juicy topics in this.
So many, right? And I'm like, people is, you know, when the email is like, do you have a topic or whatever? I'm like, no, how could I pick up a topic for this? Like, how could I? Who am I to pick up one topic, right? So let's wrap it up here. Thank you so much for your insight, for your wisdom, for your presence, for your beautiful energy. And again, I want to invite everyone to open the show notes so they could click on the links to find you, to communicate with you, to contact you if you know who you are resonates with them. And then I want to invite you to close us with an invitation, a suggestion, intention, anything that comes up for you.
My biggest thing is notice your intentions. Why are you doing what you're doing? And this doesn't have to be in sex. It doesn't have to be in kink. But look at your intentions in your life with everything you do and understand why you're doing it. Why are you saying yes to the lunch that you don't want to go to? What is the intention? Are you people pleasing? Are you being the good girl? Start to notice your intentions. That's what I'd probably leave with people.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. What a powerful prompt to have people start the journey of introspection, right? Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's so great to talk.
Thank you, everyone. We will see you next time. Bye-bye. And this is where we landed. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope you are feeling inspired, empowered, and just a little bit more bare. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to leave a review to let me know. For more bare experiences, go to simonaspark.com/bare and follow us on Instagram at Simona Spark World. I can't wait to have you back. Until then, be bare, bold, authentic, radical, expressed. See you next time.